Bhaktivedanta College of Education and Health. He is a member of the GBC Ministry of Education Development and a member of the GBC Succession Committee, chairman of ISKCON Leadership Education and Development System, and a member of the board of directors of the Mahaprabhu Institute. He is a disciple of His Holiness Swami and has travels widely in teaching of Krishna consciousness. So, Maharaj, thank you and welcome. We'd like to now answer over to you.
Hare Krishna. Am I clear?
Yes.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, Maharaj. Yes, yeah, clear.
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. I'm wondering who's the host. Who's the host? Is there some devotee's name that's the host for this program?
Yes. Yes.
The ISKCON Phoenix.
Can you come onto the screen and be the host?
Maharaj is asking the organizer, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Whether it's Gangesh or somebody else for Johannesburg.
Yes. So we are.
Issues. There is limited management capacity and these diversity issues.
So who's managing this?
Hi, so much. So Gangesh Prabhu is in Indonesia and Avikar Krishna is at New Jagannath Puri, and they both co-host the program.
So the person who introduced me has an old kind of biodata, so that means not updated, it's wrong. So
yeah.
when they upload it onto the YouTube after the video, that should be. Are we clear?
Yes, Maharaj.
So we request, besides the host, that other devotees should mute themselves because I'm getting some background sound. Everyone should mute themselves besides the two host devotees. That's Avikar Krishna and Gangesh Prabhu. So then I can begin because there's some background sound that's coming. Is that all right for now? Gangesh and Avikar Krishna Prabhu, is it okay?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay, so I'll move along. Is my volume fine for everyone, or is it has to be adjustable?
Yes, Maharaj, you're audible.
Okay,
Volume
good.
is fine, Maharaj.
All right. So we're going to read from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I'll just say the invocation for the Chaitanya Charitamrita 3 times, and we will continue. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Advaita Chandra, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda,
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Advaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda,
Jaya Jaya
Shri Chaitanya,
Jaya
Nityananda,
Advaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura
Bhakta
Bhakta Vrinda.
Vrinda.
So our discussion for today in the class is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in relation to Srila Prabhupada. So I'm going to read from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is from the Adi Leela, chapter 3, entitled The External Reasons for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Appearance. And we're going to discuss from text number 52 in this particular chapter. So I'm reading, reciting the verse. Krishnavanam Tvisha Krishnam Sangopangashtrapashadam Yagyai Sankirtana Krayai Yajantihi Sumedashaha. And the translation and the purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Swami Prabhupada. the translation. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead who constantly sings the name of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. And in the purport by Srila Prabhupada, this text is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, text, chapter 5, text number 32. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained this verse in his commentary on the Bhagavatam, known as the Krama Sandarbha, wherein he says that Lord Krishna also appears with a golden complexion. That golden Lord Krishna is Lord Chaitanya, who is worshipped by intelligent men in this age. That is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam by Garga Muni, who said that although the child Krishna was blackish, he also appears in three other colors: red, white, and yellow. He exhibited his white and red complexions in the Satya and Treta Yugas respectively. He did not exhibit the remaining color, yellow gold, until he appeared as Lord Chaitanya, who is known as Gaura Hari. Srila Jiva Goswami explains that Krishna Varna means Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Krishna Varna and Krishna Chaitanya are equivalent. The name Krishna appears with both Lord Krishna and Lord Chaitanya Krishna. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he always engages in describing Krishna and thus enjoys transcendental bliss by chanting and remembering his name and form. Lord Krishna himself appears as Lord Chaitanya to preach the highest gospel. Lord Chaitanya always chants the holy name of Krishna and describes it also. And because he is Krishna himself, whoever meets him will automatically chant the holy name of Krishna and later describe it to others. Excuse me. He injects one with transcendental Krishna consciousness, which merges the chanter in transcendental bliss. In all respects, therefore, he appears before everyone as Krishna, either by personality or by song. Simply by seeing Lord Chaitanya, one at once remembers Lord Krishna. One may therefore accept him as Vishnu Tattva. In other words, Lord Chaitanya is Lord Krishna himself. Sango Pangashtra Pashadam further indicates that Lord Chaitanya is Lord Krishna. His body is always decorated with ornaments of sandalwood and with sandalwood paste. By his super excellent beauty, he subdues all the people of the age. In other descents, the Lord sometimes used weapons to defeat the demoniac. But in this age, the Lord subdues them with his all-attractive figure as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Jiva Goswami explains that his beauty is his astra, or weapon, to subdue the demons. Because he is all attractive, it is to be understood that all the demigods lived with him as his companions. His acts were uncommon and his associates wonderful. When he propagated the Sankirtan movement, he attracted many great scholars and acharyas, especially in Bengal and Orissa. Lord Chaitanya is always accompanied by his best associates, like Lord Nityananda, Advaita, Gadadhar, and Srivas. Srila Jiva Goswami cites a verse from the Vedic literature which says that there is no necessity of performing sacrificial demonstrations for ceremonial functions. He comments that instead of engaging in such external pompous exhibitions, all people, regardless of caste, color, or creed, can assemble together and chant Hare Krishna to worship Lord Chaitanya. Krishnavanam Prisha Krishnam indicates that prominence should be given to the name of Krishna. Lord Chaitanya taught Krishna consciousness and chanted the name of Krishna. Therefore, to worship Lord Chaitanya, everyone should together chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. To propagate worship in churches, temples, or mosques is not possible because people have lost interest in that. But anywhere and everywhere, people can chant Hare Krishna. Thus, worshipping Lord Chaitanya, we can perform the highest activity and fulfill the highest religious purpose of satisfying the Supreme Lord. Srila Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, a famous disciple of Lord Chaitanya, said, the principle of transcendental devotional service having been lost, Sri Krishna Chaitanya has appeared in order to deliver again the process of devotion. He is so kind that he is distributing love of Krishna. Everyone should be attracted more and more to his lotus feet, as humming bees are attracted to a lotus flower. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I thank you all for being kind enough to offer some service for me today. And we shall specifically relate Lord Chaitanya in connection with Srila Prabhupada. In one morning walk in January of 1976 in Nellore, which is a small city, well, not very small, but quite a sizable city in Andhra Pradesh, Srila Prabhupada was walking with some disciples. So one of the disciples named Shravananda Prabhu, who was previously, you could say in one sense, hearing about some sort of criticism of Srila Prabhupada in relation to spreading Krishna consciousness in the Western world. So Prabhupada asked him, what is it? So Shravananda Prabhu said that they said, that means whoever was criticizing, that if Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted Krishna consciousness in the Western countries, then why didn't Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu go there himself? So Srila Prabhupada began to laugh. And in his laughter, he told the devotees, which was the query from Shravananda Prabhu, oh, don't you know that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left the credit for me? And the devotees started, saying, Jai, Haribol. And then Srila Prabhupada added that, and yes, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu loves his devotee more than he loves himself. So here in this particular verse and purport by Srila Prabhupada, we find it is constantly emphasized that the two syllables Krishna were always being uttered from the lotus mouth of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also was constantly glorifying Krishna with great pleasure. And in verses in this particular chapter also, it is described that when one performs this sacrifice of the congregation chanting of the holy name, even learned scholars in this age of Kali Yuga, they worship Lord Krishna, who's now sort of non-blackish because of the great internal feelings of Krishna having for Srimati Radharani, who is now the non-blackish form or the Gaurangi, Sapta Kanchana Gaurangi, form of Radharani, golden form. And there also that Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this golden form is the only worshipable deity for the Paramahamsas. And he says Paramahamsas means those who have attained the stage of the fourth order of life, which is called sannyas. And Srila Rupa Goswami, he also glorifies Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Stavamala, which is quoted in this chapter also, by saying that the sort of, in one sense, like the greatest ignorance of devotees, the greatest ignorance basically consists of activities which follows this Stavamala verse of Sri Chaitanya, of Srila Rupa Goswami, that the greatest ignorance, in sense, whether it is called a religion or irreligion or atheism, whatever it may call, is any activity that is opposed to devotional service. So any activity that is opposed to devotional service, and it may seem even religious, is actually sinful. And the particular word that's used there is kalmasa. So therefore we find that the sinful activities of the living beings comes basically from ignorance. And it may appear to be religious, but it could be still ignorance. So to destroy that ignorance, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has brought various so-called weapons, but not like, club or swords or armies. But these weapons are basically his plenary associates, which is Nityananda Prabhu and Srila Advaita Acharya Prabhu, and his devotees headed up by Gadadhar Pandit and Srivas Thakur, as well as the holy name. So in other words, this verse exemplifies that Mahaprabhu's weapons are the form of his associates, which is the members of the Panchatattva, as well as the holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj also offers us a beautiful verse that encapsulates, this appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is also given to us beautifully in the spreading of Krishna consciousness by Srila Prabhupada and his followers. So in this particular chapter, there's a beautiful verse that goes like Bahutuli Haribali Prema Drishche Chaya Kariya Kalma Sanasa Premeta Basaya. So this Bahutuli means that Mahaprabhu was actually raising his arms. What was he doing? Haribali, chanting the holy name. And by chanting the holy name, he was so steeped in deep love for Radha, especially in relationship to Krishna. Prema Drishtaya. That means he had a glance which is of deep love for all living entities who are suffering. And Chaya means he looks at them and therefore he causes this kalmasa, that the sins that can be destroyed practically immediately just by the glance of this prema drishtya, by the glance, deep glance of deep love of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And whether they accept it or not, they are simply flooded with love for Radha and Krishna, especially flooded with Radharani's love for Krishna. Now, in one particular purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes uh, the verse that glorifies Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by Srila Rupa Goswami. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Nam Nigora Tivisindama. So Srila Prabhupada indicates that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is called Mahavadanyaya Avatar because Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself and is naturally favorably disposed to the poor fallen souls more than Lord Krishna is disposed towards them. And Srila Prabhupada used to often say that when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was present, well, rather when Krishna himself was present 5,000 years ago and spoke Bhagavad Gita, he demanded that everyone surrender to him. And therefore Krishna gives us that verse in the 18th chapter. Sarva dhamam parityagya mamekam saranam vraja aham tvam sarva papabhiyo mukshayasyami masuchaha. So Krishna says, first you surrender unto me, and then Krishna promises that he will give all, he will give one and all full protection. That aham tvam sarva papabhiyo mukshayasyami masuchaha, I will protect you. But Krishna changed that in the mood of Radharani in the form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That he actually changed the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And he says you don't need to surrender. You come as you are. But even if you don't come as you are, I am coming to you whether you like it or not. So that's the mood of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we could see this is the same mood of Srila Prabhupada, even more actually. And we can safely conclude, just as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Mahavadanyaya, avatar, that means magnanimous. So we can safely conclude Srila Prabhupada is Mahavadanyaya avatar. That in the wake of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's desires, Srila Prabhupada carried that even further. We know that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu not restricted himself but spread Krishna consciousness only in the length and breadth of Bharata Bhumi, which is called India today. But Srila Prabhupada excelled that. And not only that, Srila Prabhupada presented the Vedic culture as it is to the world, and people throughout the world accepted Vedic culture as it is. And Srila Prabhupada himself gave a very beautiful analogy of this, of a tulsi sapling. Now, those who are experienced in taking care of tulsi one knows that if you transplant a tulsi sapling, one has to do it very, very carefully because the tulsi sapling is very, very delicate. Because if any part of the tulsi sapling is damaged, then the plant can easily die when one transplants it. In other words, one has to be sensitive, one has to be very careful, and one does not have to sort of change the tulsi sapling in any way. So in a similar way, Srila Prabhupada said that he had to be so careful in transplanting the Vedic culture or Krishna conscious process from India to America and to the rest of the world. And we know that Srila Prabhupada took great pains to make sure that no part, even a little, slightest part of the Vedic culture or Krishna consciousness as it is, should be damaged, injured, or changed in any way, so that Krishna consciousness could take root and grow nicely in the Western world and to the rest of the world and even back to India. Now, His Holiness Satsarup Das Goswami Maharaj, he was recollecting once that Srila Prabhupada was on a writing retreat in Hawaii. And one evening, the light was on in Srila Prabhupada's room the whole night. So the next morning, Srila Prabhupada's personal servant accompanied Srila Prabhupada walking on the beach. And the servant remarked to Srila Prabhupada that Srila Prabhupada, I noticed that last night you didn't take rest at all. The light was on in your room. Srila Prabhupada said, yes. Then he said, that means, Srila Prabhupada, that you had done a lot more translation in this night than from the previous nights. Srila Prabhupada said, yes. And then Srila Prabhupada lifted up his cane and he continued to walk. And Srila Prabhupada, thoughtful by the comments and query of his personal servant, very thoughtfully, he placed his cane into the ground, into the sea sand. Yeah. And then he said, oh, I could do the translation very, very quickly. And then as the personal servant was wondering, why is Srila Prabhupada taking so long to translate his books? Then Srila Prabhupada added, but it takes time to make it presentable for the common man. See? So when Srila Prabhupada said this, we can understand that this distinguishes Prabhupada way above the rest. Because Srila Prabhupada could take this Vedic culture as the Tulsi sapling and give his purports in such a way that anyone and everyone could understand, and not only understand, but take to the practice of Krishna consciousness and become purified and eventually become pure devotees, which no one else has ever done. No one else has ever done. Srila Prabhupada is second to none, and nobody can replace it in this sense of giving us the Vedic culture as it is and also presenting it as it is by his famous Bhaktivedanta purports so that we can take to the practice and become purified and become advancing in Krishna consciousness. At the same time, Srila Prabhupada made a very, very important comment. And his words are, which may be paraphrased in different circumstances with different devotees, but it's understandable. But his words are, it is even more important to maintain a devotee than to try to convince others to become devotees. And this is so important for us currently in this world in Krishna consciousness in our ISKCON, in our International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In other words, given the situation that we are not really exposed personally to associate with devotees, we should take the extra effort to become even more Krishna conscious, even with the physical absence of devotees, which is actually so important for us. So our goal is not to just help others or new people to be introduced to Krishna consciousness. Our goal is also to become Krishna conscious ourselves and also maintain the current devotees to become better devotees, to improve the Krishna consciousness. And in that sense, Srila Prabhupada, he gave a very wonderful example of Alexander the Great. And Srila Prabhupada said that, Alexander would advance with his army, and he very quickly used to conquer new territories as he was moving from one place or one country to another. But the mistake that he made, that Alexander will not, give the able-bodied men of his army into the territories that he already conquered. So as a result, while he was going ahead to new territories, he was not consolidating his old territories that he conquered. So in the process, Alexander used to lose some of the old territories that he had already conquered. Then Srila Prabhupada said, don't make me like Alexander the Great. In other words, Srila Prabhupada wanted us to actually preserve what he has given us. In other words, preservation means to maintain the current status quo of the devotees, to improve and increase the Krishna consciousness, as well as to give each other association, to help each other mutually in Krishna consciousness, to actually maintain the basic standard of Krishna consciousness. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada used to warn us in various ways that we should not be rushing forward ahead to conquer new frontiers, or so to speak, to preach to new people, at the expense of losing what we already have in the form of the current devotees, and try to stabilize and try to consolidate and try to help them to become more fixed and steady in Krishna consciousness. Very, very, very important. However, still, speaking about Srila Prabhupada and how we spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. So in another morning walk in Denver, in the United States, in July 1st of 1975, on that walk was Srila Prabhupada's senior disciples, which included Bhavananda Goswami at that time, who is known as Bhavananda Prabhu now. So Bhavananda Prabhu, in that morning walk, said Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, near our Mayapur, opposite the Jalangi River, there is Swarupganj. And there's one famous astrologer, big astrologer. And Srila Prabhupada, I showed him your photograph. And immediately when he saw your photograph, this famous astrologer said that this is the face of the most powerful spiritual personality on the planet. And Srila Prabhupada just began to mildly chuckle, like laugh slightly. And he just said, Hare Krishna. And then Srila Prabhupada's other senior most disciple, Brahmananda Prabhu at that time, he sort of prodded Bhavananda Prabhu, and he said, and then what else? What else? Like that. And then Bhavananda Prabhu responded, yes. And then he said, that astrologer, and then he said, I can tell from this photograph, this face, that this personality can make a house in which the whole world can live peacefully. Now, all the other devotees with Bhavananda Prabhu and Brahmananda Prabhu said, Jai Srila Prabhupada, like that. And then they waited for some moments for Srila Prabhupada's response. And Srila Prabhupada humbly said, at least I desire so. At least I desire so. So we can see that what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu desired was fulfilled by Srila Prabhupada and his followers. And even it's being fulfilled today by his grand disciples and great grand disciples to come by maintaining and spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. So there's a little bit more to say, but I'd like to conclude with that, after taking some comments or questions from the nice, wonderful assembly of devotees today. So if you have a comment or a question, you can raise your hand and then the host, or you can unmute yourself, come onto the screen so that when I see you, I can also see you in terms of getting your darshan, plus, the question becomes more, you could say animated, so I can understand your consciousness more to respond to your question or comment. All right, anyone? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Siddhi Lalasa, I believe, has a hand up. Siddhi Lalasa, it's wonderful to see you again and get your darshan after so long. Can you unmute and tell us your question?
Krishna Maharaj,
Yeah.
I wanted to know if there is any systematic study of Chaitanya Charitamrita, because I made a group of devotees and I started teaching from the beginning. I found it very difficult. It's so technical, the language is very technical and I'm struggling with it. So is there any way that I
Yes,
can study?
His Holiness Kadamakanan Swami, he teaches Chaitanya Charitamrita. I also do, but I'm still developing something. But if you write to him and say if he has anything, I know that he likes to systematically present Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So you can probably contact him. You can tell him that I told you that you contact. Is that all right?
How do I contact him?
I'll send you his email address.
Alright.
Okay. Anyone else has a comment or a question? Anyone? As I said, should leave time for questions and answers, and then I can conclude. Come on, there's so many devotees on this Zoom. There's over 100 devotees or more. And there's the Facebook, or somebody written a question from the host.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, we have a question at least from Indonesia. Just give us a second.
Okay. So for the others who are in from Malaysia and India and Mauritius, ISKCON Malaysia has beautiful deities called Sri Sri Nitai Gaura Hari. They are my first Istadevs. That means they are my first deities that I got darshan on when I joined in ISKCON. They were near Durban in our farm called Chaitanya.
Alla, bakit ba face?
So maybe if you can give us
Ebe
darshan
ku
of
tlas
those
na.
deities, it will help us to
Tentu ve.
get
Ma
more
mesa sa, da
taste and
da chat sa.
that we can take the question.
Maharaj,
The deities on the screen
close
and
the tab.
ask the question. Can you give us darshan, please, of the deities?
Maharaj, the author includes at the moment.
Right there, and maybe if you cannot get it together, can you get the question and can you tell us the question that was written down on the chat or maybe on Facebook or something? I can't hear you. If you have a question, you have to come close to the microphone. Come close to the microphone. Where's the computer that's you have to get close? For the others, this is in the temple room of Sri Nitai Gaura Hari in Malaysia near Johannesburg. So you got to be a little loud with your question. Tell us your name. I can't see you clearly. Cannot hear you. Cannot hear you at all. Cannot hear the question at all. I think it's muted. You have to unmute and.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you, but she has to come closer. Who's asking the question? Tell me.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I wanted to know that you were mentioning how important it is to take care of devotees that who may fall down. So I just want to know what would the process be if some devotee might have fall down. So it's our duty actually to do our utmost best to try to bring back that devotee, because to maintain devotees that who are here is more important. So if someone's fallen down, would that be that we have to make a lot of effort and endeavor to find some way to bring that devotee back who has fallen down?
This is a wonderful question and a very practical one. So I will attempt to respond to your question. Yeah. Now, a devotee never falls, but a devotee may sort of, by dint of some material desire, may take a temporary leave from the practice of devotional service. So the first thing is that in the consciousness of ourselves, if we want to help somebody who we may feel has fallen down, that word fallen down should not enter our consciousness who are not falling down yet. In other words, we should take it positively to help that devotee from that devotee's perspective who has fallen down, not from our perspective that that person has fallen down. So I'll tell you why I'm saying this. Because it is a fact that we are living in the material world. And one, despite being in Krishna consciousness, irrespective of how many years and irrespective of how advanced one is, one will always have the tendency or the proclivity to fall down. So if somebody in our perspective has apparently fallen down, we should help them to rise up or get up somehow or the other and bring them to the basic standard of the practice of Krishna consciousness again. But in our consciousness from our perspective, one should not consider it as a fall down. We should see it positively that the devotee is struggling to be a devotee, still being a devotee but struggling to be a devotee. Now, why do I say this? Because, I have some faults, maybe many faults, but I can recognize some of them. Maybe the many of them I cannot recognize yet, like that. So one of my faults is that when I see a devotee not practicing Krishna consciousness nicely and has some fall down, I may have a tendency to actually keep a respectful distance, which is not nice of me. I have to improve on that. See, definitely I have to improve on that. So, in order to improve on that, I have taken it in another way. I have taken it that I am also preaching to new people who are sort of already uh, fallen. In other words, these new people that I'm preaching to, I'm not asking them of their previous activities, of sinful activities, which is against a devotional service. I'm not even questioning that with them. So, because I'm preaching to new people and I see their progress, that they're reducing slowly their sinful activities by taking to the practices of Krishna consciousness, especially chanting the holy names in japa, I become very exhilarated and happy that somebody is improving from their material existence and coming to this spiritual life in Krishna consciousness. So when I see it like that, then I apply the same thing to the devotee who's become weak spiritually and who's not following nicely. I would say that, or maybe, that's meant to happen to him or her, and he is struggling to be a nice devotee. So why should I question, you know, which I would not question to new people about their previous sinful activities. So why should I even question this in my consciousness of a devotee who was practicing nicely before, but maybe not practicing now? Why should I even question that's in inverted commas fall down situation? I should just simply help them to come to the basic standard again, just as I would simply help new people to come to the basic standard of practicing Krishna consciousness. So I also have to improve in that. I just thought I'll respond to your question in that way, from a personal level. Is that all right?
Yes, Maharaj.
All right. I'm not sure how much time we have with everyone, whether you want me to conclude with some other thoughts on other points in relation of Srila Prabhupada to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I could take one more question or comment and then continue. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. This is Nityananda Das. Yeah.
Oh, Nityananda Prabhu ki jai.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting this program, and thank you to the organizers. I was wanting to ask a question. I was reading Bhagavatam, Canto 2, and there's a small paragraph in the purport. I was thinking actually about writing to you to ask you, but can I just read this few lines and then I wanted to ask you something?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Canto 2, Chapter 9, Prabhupada is writing in the purport, the pure devotee is never puffed up like the non-devotee class of men who falsely think they are God. It is astonishing to see how a person who is being kicked by the laws of the Lord's illusory energy at every step can falsely think of becoming one with the Lord. Such thinking is the last snare of the illusory energy offered to the conditioned soul. The first illusion is that he wants to become Lord of the material world by accumulating wealth and power. But when he is frustrated in that attempt, he wants to become one with the Lord. So, Maharaj, my question is, Prabhupada is mentioning the first illusion and the last illusion. Are there other illusions in between?
So can you tell me what was the first one again?
The first one where is we want to become the lord of the world, material world by having wealth and power, and the last one is we want to merge with the Lord by like impersonal liberation.
And your question is about anything in between?
Yes. Is there like other illusions? I was just thinking about it. I don't know. Thank you.
Nice question. I'll try to help you with the answer for whatever it's worth. Okay. The basic illusion between these two is the bodily conception of life. That means I am the body rather than the spirit soul in relation to the Supreme Spirit Soul, which is Radha and Krishna. However, the basic illusion between these two is the desire to control. And an example of the desire to control, like even a little baby that will put on a false tantrum to control the parents to get what they want. Just as one example. Yeah. And then the wife wants to control the husband wants to control the wife, and then extend it to the community and extend it to the country. The president wants to control everyone despite not being voted properly into power and things like that. So in order to transition the desire to control, so the desire to control indicates that you want to be the phony controller. Krishna is the supreme controller, but you want to be like an imitated controller. Now, that desire to control that makes you a controller should change. And the change comes basically from a transition of not being the controller, but still being in control. Like I'll give you an example. An example is like the service of a temple president. Now the temple president is the biggest servant, but still the temple president has to control. But that doesn't make it necessarily a controller, because he's a temple president in relation to Krishna conscious activities. So you can be in control but not be a controller. So that's the essence between these two, you could say, what you read from the Srimad Bhagavatam. The first one is to desire to control the material nature, to lord it over. And the last is to become God, or merge into the existence of the oneness of the Supreme. In between is that we have to transition from not being a controller, but still being in control in relation to Krishna conscious activities. In relation to Krishna conscious activities. And I'll give you an example in relation to my ashram, basically, as a sannyasi. So as a sannyasi, it indicates that one has to control one's mind and senses. See? So as a sannyasi, one has to endeavor practically every moment, every day, to control the mind and senses. But as a sannyasi, we do not bother too much about controlling the mind and senses. We just try to simply engage our mind, body, and words in the service of Govinda, in the service of Srila Prabhupada, in the service of the devotees, and automatically that has happened. So one has to exercise some sense of control in any situation, materially or spiritually. But spiritually, one may have a position of service that one has to control. But that doesn't mean to say that one is becoming the controller. So if we can transition to control but not be the controller in Krishna-related activities, we are doing well. For example, the father has a daughter, and the daughter is a devotee, and the father is also a devotee. So the father has to exercise some control over the daughter to make her a devotee and to practice Krishna consciousness. But it doesn't mean to say that he's the controller of his daughter, because it's Krishna related and Krishna conscious practice related and Krishna conscious activities. One has to be in control as a father. So that means he's a devotee father, not just a regular father who wants to control for his own sense gratification. Are we all right? Yeah. It's a question a little out of the discussion of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in relation to Prabhupada, but it's a wonderful question nevertheless. So I believe we're getting close to our time up. Gangesh and Avikar Krishna Prabhu. Can I just conclude with something, or you want to give it more time for more questions and comments? From my side, I'm fine to go a little longer if you like. The host should let us know, and then otherwise I can conclude. Hare Krishna, Krishna
Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Rama. Yes?
There's an online question from Malati Dasi. Could take that one.
Yeah, can you tell her to come on the screen? So what's there's some interference with some sound. You can come onto the screen and ask the question and come next to the microphone, unmute yourself. And I didn't get your name clearly again. Please, we'll give you that time. We are patient. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Krishna Maharaj, you can hear me now?
We can hear you, but I cannot get your darshan. Come onto the screen. It's nice to see devotees.
I have switched on the video, Maharaj.
Malati.
Yes, Guru Maharaj.
Yes, Malati Dasi. Tell me your question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances, Maharaj. My question is again about maintaining our present devotees. But still we see that there are devotees who cannot open their hearts still to other devotees due to some confidential issues, like the other devotee doesn't keep it confidential, and the whole thing comes out in a very different way. So I just want to know that that fear is always there, that whom you have to confide to. So how we should see it, like devotees being saying everything to everyone that damages the image of the person who has said it. So I want to know how we have to deal with this.
Thank you, Malati, for your practical question. Okay. Now, it is very important to know that there's something more of a suffering condition than not actually, you could say, taking people into confidence and speaking to them. You know, Srila Rupa Goswami tells us that Dati Prati Grinati Guyam Akyati Prichati. So Guyam Akyati Prichati means inquiring confidentially, Dati Prati Grinati, and Guyam Akyati Prichati means Akyati Prichati indicates that one should reveal one's mind and heart and consciousness in confidence. One must do that. See? So now, your question remains that who to find that one is confidential. Is this? I'll answer that question after speaking something prior to that. Okay? Yeah. Now, it is very important to know that if one does not have somebody to speak to, then one is suffering more rather than speaking to somebody who breaks your confidentiality. And that suffering condition, that if you do not take anyone into confidence and reveal your mind and heart and consciousness, leads to some disease that cannot be cured. And that disease comes from what is called mental illness. And the symptom of that mental illness is called loneliness. Loneliness is the greatest suffering condition of anyone. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada's second pranam mantra, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatadistatarine. Now sometimes we may relate that Nirvishesha and Sunyavadi means voidism and impersonalism. Yes, but in a broad sense, Prabhupada has come to remove that from our hearts, from our minds, and from our consciousness. And the greatest suffering condition of feeling void, especially, is loneliness. Okay? So therefore, it is better to reveal one's mind or heart and one's consciousness to somebody that you feel that would keep confidentiality, rather than having previous experiences of revealing one's mind and heart to somebody who you felt was confidential and they broke your confidentiality. So when somebody breaks your confidentiality, then you become more lonely. You take more shelter of voidism and impersonalism, which is not correct. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada used to give the example that if you have a cataract in your eye, Srila Prabhupada said, you don't take the eye out. You take the cataract out, then you can see clearly. But if you have the cataract in your eye and you say this eye is troublesome, let me take the eye out and no more trouble, then you become blind. So loneliness leads to similar thing. Loneliness leads to blindness. It leads to impersonalism and voidism. We don't want that part. So therefore, if one has revealed one's heart or mind or consciousness to somebody who has broke their confidentiality, it doesn't mean that one should not have confidentiality in anyone else anymore. Then one will become more blind and one will go into more feeling lonely. So we should continue to keep the principle and the practicality of following Srila Rupa Goswami. Guyam akyati prichati. We should still reveal our mind, our hearts to someone that we feel can keep confidentiality. And eventually, if even those, from one instance to another person, another instance to another person, and you have so much experience, one may have, that everyone is breaking my confidentiality, then what to do? Now listen carefully. Because you have to improve. Because perhaps you have also broken confidentiality of others who spoke to you. And one may be getting a purificatory reaction that others are breaking confidentiality of who you have confidence in. So you have to improve. So the two things has to happen. One is one personally has to improve in keeping confidentiality of others. And the secondly is to still follow the principle of revealing one's mind or heart or consciousness, of taking others into confidence. And eventually, after some trial and error, you will find that you can always maintain confidentiality by revealing your heart and mind to this devotee, or to that devotee, or to that devotee. Krishna will arrange that. So we have to improve from our side as well as continue the principle of the practicality of revealing our mind and hearts in confidence. Do not fall prey to become a victim of loneliness and saying, leave me alone, or saying in a nice polite way, enough is enough, I want to be left alone. Not like that either. It is different, it is very different from taking time off to spend time with oneself, for more extra hearing and chanting japa or engaging in kirtan on your own or reading Prabhupada and studying Prabhupada's books, that you need time for yourself. That's not being alone. But loneliness means not taking shelter of any of the practicalities within the process of the practice of Krishna consciousness. That's not good at all. So therefore, once again, I repeat, one has to improve oneself in keeping confidentiality in relation to others. And secondly, one should continue the principle of Rupa Goswami, Guyam Aketi Prichati, and continue to reveal one's mind or heart in confidence to someone who one feels that one will not break confidentiality. And eventually Krishna will help you. Only to those persons would maintain your confidentiality. Quality, wonderful question. Very practical to maintain the Krishna consciousness of other devotees, which I mentioned in my class earlier as well, to help and maintain the peace. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So should I conclude now? Our hosts, Gangesh Prabhu and Avikar Krishna Prabhu. Can I conclude now, or should I continue with questions and answers? We still have the same, participants online. What should I do? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Where's my host? While they're coming on, one of the comments that I read is that devotees would like me to have more classes with you all on Zoom. Yes, I look forward to your nice association in the near future again. I would like to do that.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much, Krishna Maharaj.
Is there like a comment or a question, or should I conclude? I'm not sure what to do. I don't want to disappoint anyone.
Maharaj, you may conclude if you so desire.
Okay, I shall conclude. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu always appeared in 4 places. He appeared in the household within the temple of Mother Sachi Devi. He was always present there. He also appeared wherever Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu danced and chanted the holy names. And he always also appeared in the home of Srivas Thakur or Srivas Pandit during the congregational chanting of the holy name in Srivas Bhavan. And he always appeared in the home of Raghava Pandit. Now, Srila Prabhupada have us understand that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared simply because Mahaprabhu was attracted to the love of his devotees. And this is a very natural characteristic of love, that wherever one feels love, one is always present there. So similarly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was always present in these 4 places, in the home of Mother Sachi, wherever Lord Nityananda danced and chanted, in the home of Srivas Pandit, and the home of Raghava Pandit. So in a similar way, Srila Prabhupada is present for us in various ways. Srila Prabhupada is present in his books. Srila Prabhupada is present in our relating to each other now in Krishna conscious discussions. And Srila Prabhupada is present essentially in all our practices within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And still, in Srila Prabhupada's last days, one disciple, in his innocent way, said that Srila Prabhupada, you said that your Guru Maharaj was disgusted. Is the same true of you now? And we should know that in Prabhupada's last days, that Prabhupada couldn't hardly even utter a word vocally, but was just moving his lips. When Srila Prabhupada heard this from the disciple, when the disciple said, "You said that your Guru Maharaj was disgusted and left early. Is the same true of you now?" Srila Prabhupada said, "No," in a loud voice, although he was not capable of even speaking. And then Srila Prabhupada humbly said, "If Krishna allows me, I will be most happy to stay in your company. In fact, all of you are the best association." So yeah, we can see that Srila Prabhupada is most encouraging. He loves all of us, irrespective, you know, of our situation, or irrespective whether we are not practicing nicely, or irrespective whether we are very advanced devotees. It does not matter. Srila Prabhupada loves all of us. And Prabhupada said, in fact, all of you are the best association. And I'd like to conclude with one devotee who recently actually left us. He was very dear to Srila Prabhupada, and he was a very, very enthusiastic book distributor. He always had books with him. And when I was serving in Vrindavan, some say over 20 years ago, as the president of the Krishna Balaram Mandir there, I used to speak to him because he was a resident of Vrindavan after Prabhupada left. And his name is Vishal Prabhu. He's late now. He just passed on actually, I don't know, a few weeks or a month or so ago in Vrindavan itself. So one time he asked Srila Prabhupada a question, which he was relating personally to me. He said, "Srila Prabhupada, can you describe ISKCON? Srila Prabhupada, can you describe the activities of a devotee in ISKCON?" Then he said, "Srila Prabhupada, can you describe a devotee in ISKCON?" And Srila Prabhupada was so happy, and in a beamingly smiling way, he answered Vishal's question in 6 words. Srila Prabhupada said, "Chant Hare Krishna, spread Hare Krishna." 6 words. And actually, this is the essence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's basic instruction to all devotees, is that one should chant the holy name of Krishna and serve the devotees of Krishna, which was so nicely given by Srila Prabhupada to Vishal Prabhu. Chant Hare Krishna and spread Hare Krishna. So I'd like to take this opportunity now to offer my most humble obeisances to all Vaishnava devotees of the Lord who have assembled here today, and to other devotees all over the world. And we will conclude with the Vaishnava Pranam mantra.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu bhaivacha patitanam pavanabhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha.
Grantakuri Vaishnav Vrandaki
Jai.
Maharaj.
Maharaj ki.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Nitai Go Premanande
Hari
Shri
Hari Bo.
Nitai Gora Hari Ki Jai.
Jai.
Nitai Go Premanande.
Hari Bo.